People regularly ask me whether they can travel while their green card application is pending. And ordinarily, my response would have been yes, while your adjustment of status is pending, you are seeking status, and ICE officers don't really mess with people who are in the process of becoming permanent residents, absent unusual circumstances like criminal history or some sort of national security concerns. Like ordinarily, once your adjustment of status application is pending, I would consider you to be lawfully present in the US until they make a final decision on that green card application. However, recently there have been news reports of ICE offices throughout the country receiving memoranda from higher ups in Washington instructing them to turn up the knob on enforcement activity all the way past 10 to 11 and to get creative with apprehensions and beginning deportations of people who may not have been their direct targets, but collaterals in this war on immigration. And what that actually means is that ICE officers are about to become much more aggressive. They're much more likely to use tactics to interview more people than people who are just their primary targets. For example, if they go to a workplace or someone's house in search of a specific individual who probably has like a deportation order, a final deportation order, or some sort of criminal history that makes them a target, they can very well interview other people in the house if those people subject themselves to the interview, if they open the door, if they voluntarily speak with ICE. And once ICE believes that you are unlawfully US, they are likely to apprehend you, to physically arrest you, detain you, to begin processing you either for removal proceedings or for expedited removal if you entered the US within the past 2 years. Given this new environment that we find ourselves in, where ICE is pretty much going to go out of their way to increase the number of apprehensions and deportations, when my clients ask me, can I travel domestically while my green card application is pending? My response nowadays is I wouldn't if I was you. I personally just took a flight. It was a domestic flight. The airport we landed at in Florida was Orlando International. The airport we left out of in New York was a small airport that was not an international airport. In neither airport, the domestic airport or the international airport, did I have any encounters with ICE. I didn't see ICE. I didn't see any people with Department of Homeland Security clothing, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. I don't actually believe there were ICE officers on my departing airport or in my arrival airport or coming back, but that wasn't the guaranteed outcome. There are reports of ICE officers being at some domestic terminals. It is possible. And so given the high and unusual level of risk for immigrants right now, if you're applying for adjustment of status and it's your only immigration status, like if you don't also have an H-1B visa that's active at that time or some other dual intent visa, if you're only pursuing adjustment of status, I would personally avoid even traveling internationally. I don't want to be alarmist here, but even when you travel from one state to another, you're at a heightened risk of interacting with federal officers who have a right to regulate interstate commerce. When you travel out in like the Midwest, the places where ICE officers are most likely to set up checkpoints are going to be along state borders when you're crossing from one state to another. And same thing with domestic flights. I mean, if you're flying from one state to another, federal officers have a right to be there. If they decided to target that specific terminal at that airport, it is possible that you could have an encounter with immigration officers. I think statistically, the probability is low, but if it does happen to you, you could end up in a nightmare scenario even if you have an adjustment of status application pending. Now, the place where I think the risks are even higher is if you've entered the US most recently within the past 2 years. Because when you've entered within the past 2 years, they could subject you to expedited removal, where you don't necessarily have a right to speak to an immigration judge, and they could expeditiously remove you without ever allowing you the opportunity to attend immigration court. Now, there are some exceptions to this. It's not always the case, but I would be particularly careful. I mean, best case scenario, you just took a crazy risk. Worst case scenario, you could literally end up deported and not be able to pursue your adjustment of status. And then we have to deal with a whole nother host of issues like transferring the I-130 to a consulate abroad. And you might even be subject to a bar depending on how much unlawful presence you have before you were removed from the United States. So right now, my advice to people is don't travel while your green card application is pending. If you've been here for a bunch of years and you're not subject to expedited removal, I think the risks are a little bit lower because you would have a right to proceed with immigration court, and we could always seek adjustment of status while you're in removal proceedings. But I mean, even if that happens, you're gonna add a substantial legal bill and processing delays to this process. You could end up spending like $10,000 more on your immigration status if you have to now defend yourself in immigration court. Depends on the lawyer you use. And you could also delay the process by several years where you're not exactly sure what the outcome is gonna be. So anyway, guys, I just want to make this short video about people who are considering traveling domestically while their green card application is pending. I just think it's a particularly risky time right now. I just want to take a moment to say, if you have your green card, I would not worry about traveling domestically. I know there's a lot of fear mongering out there about green card holders being placed into deportation proceedings. It is happening, but statistically unlikely for the average permanent resident. I would say it's only happening to a very tiny percentage of people, and it's either like politically motivated, or there's a criminal history, or these people are being apprehended during their return from an international flight where there is a substantial history of them spending too much time outside of the United States. The average permanent resident who has no criminal history, only goes on a couple weeks vacation internationally each year, and who obtained their green card without any errors in the process is at very low risk. I would say close to no risk, very low risk of actually having immigration problems. So anyway, I hope this helps somebody out there who's in the adjustment of status process. I'm always erring on the side of caution, where if I give this advice to thousands of people, I don't want there to be a few of them who expose themselves to unnecessary risks. So I'm always thinking about this from a perspective of many people applying at once for adjustment of status. You know, the individual risks might be small, but when you extrapolate that over thousands of people, the risks become measurable. And so that's why I give out advice like this in these videos. If you're interested in learning more about family-based immigration, be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you personally need any assistance with family-based immigration or naturalization, you could schedule a consultation. My information is in the video description below, and I'll see you guys next time for another video.